Welcome to Accotink Unitarian Universalist Church and the live stream of our worship service. I'm Reverend Pippin Whitaker, your minister. My pronouns are she, her, and hers. Accotink UU Church is a welcoming and inclusive community, and we seek to create a more just and compassionate world through our actions to bring about justice and by honoring the web of nature, of which we are a part. All are welcome here, no matter whom you love, no matter your identity or heritage, no matter your beliefs or background, your means or your gifts, you are welcome here, welcome in this religious community. And you are also welcome to share in our virtual coffee hour after worship, simply by staying in this Zoom meeting after the service ends.
Greeting. I am Sheila Doles, your worship associate for today, and my pronouns are she, her, and hers. If you're new to Accotink and would like to talk more about this church, please be sure to reach out to me, our minister, Reverend Pippin, or a member of the board. Contact information is posted on our website at www.accotinkuu.org. On our website, you can check the online order of service in the worship section of our webpage. While you're on the website, be sure to check our events page for upcoming virtual gatherings and other news. I now invite you to close your other windows or apps and devices, take a deep breath, and center yourself for worship.
Today, let us focus on a new idea in worship. It's perseverance, but perseverance through listening. Today is International Day of the world's Indigenous peoples. Indigenous means of the earth. Although we are all born of the earth, our lifestyles differ. Our relationships to earth differ. How does this connect to perseverance? Quite plainly, if we humans are to persevere through our current environmental crisis, justice crisis, humanitarian crisis, we must learn to listen, not only to earth, but to the people of the earth. Some of us, more than others, live and act in closer relationship to earth. Some hold cultural knowledge of ancient ecosystems. Some tend more to extract some desire from the land, whether that's an impossibly green lawn or a box store built in wetlands. Let us come back to these ideas and take a moment today to sit with this idea. What does it mean to be of the earth versus on the earth?
We light this chalice for the web of life which sustains us, for the sacred circle of life in which we have our being, for the earth and all her people, for the sky above and below, and for our Mother Earth, and for the mystery.
The line, "We are listening in the light of God," draws me back to the reading, the story. I want to invite us into a time to let our hearts hold a little of the everything of life right now. There is the energy and the joy of knowing we are tied to the earth. A friend and colleague of mine said her faith in nature teaches her that nothing is wasted. Nature wastes nothing. And so she feels held no matter what happens. And at the same time that we feel the connection to earth beneath us, no matter what. The story said, your heart hears everything, sees everything, smells everything, tastes everything, touches everything, including the darkness and the light in the world. And I want to invite you to take a breath in, that joy and energy, but allow it to sit and mix with all the struggle. The pandemic is still surging. The explosion in Beirut, almost out of nowhere, out of carelessness. Protests there, protests here. An executive that is disturbingly taking action that supersedes those powers that belong to our legislature. There's worry out there in our world. I want you to take a breath. We're carrying a lot in our personal lives right now. And I want you to put your hand on your heart. I invite you to center yourself. Amidst all of this, the earth is still under your feet, faithfully holding you up. Your heart is still beating, faithfully carrying you into the next moment. Let this tie you back to the strength and the joy in your life. Listening in the light of God. Even here we are at home. May it be so. Amen. A few days ago, just ahead of a solid week of thunderstorms in the forecast, I boldly dashed out my front door with my oldest child to hurry to a pond in search of wild guppies. I caught 5 in one scoop, just as the thunder rolled in and my child declared, "We'd better get inside." Why was I out there hurriedly gathering guppies? Because my children's beloved neon green glowfish had died, and they were very sad about the lonely pink fish left in our tank. And there were multiple reasons not to go to the store to buy another fish. The obvious reason is also the reason for just about everything these days, from forgetting a meeting to eating 5 snacks a day. Yes, I've done it. To getting snappy with your loved ones. You know the reason: COVID-19. And there's no curbside pickup for live animals, did you know? So now, when one needs a fish, one must weigh a new calculus. Is it worth walking into a pet store to buy a fish if you might walk out with a deadly virus? Or if you might inadvertently spread the virus to a hapless bystander with multiple risk factors? For a new pet fish? Not worth it, I decided. But there was more, so much more in that decision to boldly leave the house and take my daughter to the pond to try to catch fish. I had heard that freshwater fish populations are struggling, by the way, especially some fish. According to the National Geographic, the migratory freshwater fish population has declined by 76% in 50 years. But I grew up catching and releasing guppies, and I knew we could catch the little wild guppies, and when they had babies too many for our tank, we could release them. Now, I know we're not saving the world here. Our interaction with nature would be fairly neutral, but certainly better compared to driving to an air-conditioned store to buy fish who barely survived shipping, and before that, who survived a fish farm with all the fossil fuels involved in transit and more. So there were environmental reasons for the dash to the pond, too. Now, there was little chance of us catching another neon green glowfish. Yeah, that's for sure. But we could walk alongside nature, and I could teach my child a little bit of my childhood. I explained as we walked why we needed to go now, while the earth was dry, before a week of rain made it treacherously soggy. And walking by the lake, We noticed bright green film where the fertilizer runoff had made it hard to see underneath. We wondered if the little fish we were looking for could breathe. We wondered what it looked like here 50 years ago or 100 years ago before all the bright lawns came. We thought of the poor people who might have fished here but couldn't now due to the no fishing signs and who knows what consequences from the polluting fertilizer. As we walked along, searching for a spot to catch our fish, I showed her how to find a firm, low spot by the water, a nice sturdy branch to hold on to if I lost my balance, how to crouch still, how not to attract attention from the hungry ducks who would be expecting breadcrumbs, how to hover with the net just above the water and wait. We were immersed in the experience. And we came away with 5 tiny fish that are now happily living a life free of duckbills in the tank at home. In that excursion, we turned away from our usual habit of meeting our needs with the convenience of consumerism. We turned away from the, I want that, I'll buy it solution. Where did that ideal of wish fulfillment as a goal come from anyway? Where did we get the desire to buy a genetically modified pet fish? I thought, what kind of hyper-consumerist monsters have we become? I am so glad in at least that one little decision that we found another way. We became open and listening to nature. We wondered what was there that we could share. We were blessed to become more connected to my history, my childhood in Mississippi, in her muddy waters. I'm so grateful. And I want more of that. I want more connection to nature and history and my ancestors and justice. Not some isolated history lesson or some isolated social justice action, but integrated into my life. A wholeness that integrates my life, my needs, my family, our land, our history. It's a wholeness I've never had even in my childhood in Mississippi. I grew up 5 miles from the historic African American community known as Turkey Creek in Gulfport, Mississippi. And if you haven't watched the documentary about Turkey Creek promoted by our Racial Justice Committee, I highly encourage you to view it now if you can. It's called Come Hell or High Water, The Battle for Turkey Creek. From the description, the documentary is about the descendants of emancipated slaves who settled on the Mississippi Gulf Coast. The residents of Turkey Creek were stewards of the creek's rich wetland habitat for generations. Today, the town is surrounded by an airport, big box stores, highways, and an industrial canal that threaten both the community and its wetlands. When the graves of Derek Evans's ancestors were bulldozed for the sprawling city of Gulfport, the Boston teacher, Mr. Evans, returns home to stand up to powerful corporate interests and politicians alongside his neighbors over the course of a decade. It is worth watching, and if you watch the film, you'll recall how Mr. Evans was also fighting to stop chronic flooding that resulted from the overdevelopment and threatened all the homes near Turkey Creek. This had been getting worse for years as big box stores went up. But for me, spending almost a decade of my life 5 miles from Turkey Creek, I had no clue about it. I never visited the creek or had any inkling of its caretakers or their struggle. I didn't know the land and creek were so threatened. Although I was well aware of the desolation of the land from those very same box stores because they had wiped out the beautiful places I used to hike in the little scrubby woods. But I didn't even know Turkey Creek was nearby, and Derek Evans's efforts to save Turkey Creek began after I had departed for college, so we never crossed paths. But my mom, a social worker on the Gulf Coast, who watched the documentary with me, she helped support his efforts and remembers Derek fondly. What is the lesson here? For a decade, there was no mechanism, no process to urge me to listen to Mr. Evans, to listen to the people of Turkey Creek who could speak for the land and were speaking for the land as I was there. My cultural lifestyle was designed to focus on my education, my consumption, my participation in some abstract economy. My lifestyle was designed to live on the land, and anyone or anything of the earth was background or obstacle. It doesn't have to be this way, and it shouldn't be this way. But there is a very good reason for the way things are. Our dominant culture has us move through places ahistorically, or maybe only back to a convenient date that a building was put up because there is ugliness in the older history of this place. If we listen to history and to the people who are living of the earth, then we have to change our ways. Walking by the pond, if I were to live as a person of the earth, I would need to ask those homeowners to stop choking the pond with fertilizer. That's not popular. I would have to ask the officials to let people gather food there, people who are hungry, people who are now more food insecure than ever. In Mississippi, it could have been part of my lifestyle to learn how all the people of my community were doing and to learn the story of the land. But then I would have had to join the struggle of the people of Turkey Creek and say no to development. What is the story of our church land? We would need to go back before the church purchased our land in 1986. The land that holds our beloved and freshly painted building, and thank you again, building and grounds crew, for restoring and repainting the exterior. Thank you. Anybody should drive by and look at the building. But the land that holds our building has a much older history. It's Manahoac land. And as I reminded us before, the Manahoac have since merged with other tribes, but they cared for our land for over 10,000 years, including the land that our building sits upon. The Manahoac may be difficult to reach because they merged with other tribes. That may not be easy to find the descendants of the people who cared for this land. But this area was also neighbor to the Powhatan Confederacy, and some of those tribes are still very active today. If we listen to this history and the call from our Indigenous leaders that we spoke to you through the action of immediate witness, then there is something we can do to live in a way that is more of the earth that we rest on than on the earth. We could respond to the call from our leaders and begin to build relationships. When people speaking of the earth share the call for justice, we need to get good at listening. Whether it's the Mashpee Wampanoag or the people of Turkey Creek or our neighbors of the Powhatan Confederacy, it isn't a neat package either. It's not going to sound like save this spot or that for some pristine natural resource you can walk by. It's not what it means to be of the earth. To be of the earth is to live the deep down truth that we are dependent on the earth. We have stories and spirit and culture wrapped up in nature. We care for the earth like our companion, not like a prized treasure. Nature, environment, justice, culture, history are all bound up in one very important thing we should all care about, no matter where we come from, and that is our shared future. To get good at listening, we must all learn to listen when our prophetic leaders, our Indigenous people, call us to our better selves. If we are listening, we will, as the action of immediate witness asks, we will gather in solidarity with all Indigenous peoples struggling to preserve their lands, waters, peoples, sacred sites, and sovereignty. We'll push for the release of Indigenous water protectors from prison. We'll work on public policy that's decolonizing. We would stop and reverse ecological harm in genuine collaboration with and taking leadership from communities most consistently and harshly impacted by extractive exploitation of land, water, air, and all beings. We would research and identify and acknowledge the Indigenous peoples historically and currently connected with the land occupied by our congregation. We would re-examine practices like anchoring our UU origins in Pilgrim invasion and reifying some fictional Thanksgiving. Our shared future depends on heeding these calls Yet these calls have been emanating from Indigenous peoples and minorities for centuries. Why have we not listened? Like my childhood in Mississippi, our lifestyle does not focus on being of the earth or of her people. Our extractive relationship to nature and cultural obsession with wish fulfillment through consumption has driven us out on a precarious ledge, a ledge where we actually contemplate whether a genetically modified neon green fish is worth risking someone's life to get. I contemplated whether it was worth risking someone's life to go buy a neon green fish. Let us step away from that ledge, like I step boldly out to the pond. Step away from the storm to get the guppies. Let us move away from the roaring throngs of wild consumer wishes. Let us move away from the all foregone conclusions about development and expansion, stepping away long enough to listen. Listen. We can walk down to the pond softly, gather only what we need, and restore the waters. We can respond to the Indigenous people's call for justice and join in the struggle for our future. We can turn aside from consumption, bend down and touch the soil, and become a little more of the earth than on it. Amen. We extinguish our chalice flame, yet we carry within us what we've kindled. The light of inspiration, the warmth of compassion, the fire of commitment, a listening ear. May we bring these gifts out into the world, sharing them radiantly.
I invite you now to join me in our community blessing with these words of David Bumba. This church is dedicated to the proposition that behind all our differences and beneath all our diversity, there is a unity that makes us one and binds us forever together in spite of time, death, and the space between the stars. We pause now in silent witness to that unity.
Listen, we have thought in this worship about listening. Listen so that we can step away from the ledge before it is too late. Listen not only to our inmost selves, but to the earth, to the people of the earth, the people who know another way. Together, we can listen and we can choose. In every moment, we can choose another way. Let us find the courage to listen, to know that we are not adrift. Someone is speaking to us. Many are speaking to us. Our heart is speaking to us. And we need only bend down, touch the earth, and listen. Amen.